What's up, Green Bay Packers fans? Welcome back, and as always, thank you for joining me. My name's Paul Brettel. It's the bye week, so we're here to reflect on the Packers' first 5 games, specifically what has gone wrong on the offensive side of the ball. And I know answer could be everything, a lot of things, but we're going to dive into my 8 big factors that have contributed to the Packers' struggles on offense. But first, hit like on the video, hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. I do greatly appreciate it. You can follow all of my work over at Packers Wire, and you can follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. So, as I said, we're here to discuss what's gone wrong on offense for the Packers. Unfortunately, in football, whether things are going really well or really poorly, there's very rarely ever that one thing that we can point to, that one reason why things are either going really well or going really poorly. It's usually a culmination of a few things or oftentimes a number of things. So I want to dive into what I feel are really the 8 big factors, 8 big contributors to what we've seen from this Packers offense that unfortunately is going backwards. Like, if at the start of or before the season began, I think we all expected ups and downs, maybe not to the extent that the highs have been and the lows have been, but we expected ups and downs this season. But I think, beyond the win column, what we really wanted to see was progression. Progression from Jordan Love, progression from this young offense. And unfortunately, they're going backwards. They've been going backwards for the last few weeks now. And I think this bye week does come at a good time for them. Opportunity to take a step back, hit the reset button a little bit. But nonetheless, things are getting worse rather than seeing incremental improvements. So let's dive into the 8 items that are contributing to the current woes on offense. First up, and these are in no particular order, but first up, Jordan Love's deep ball accuracy. So he's been very, very willing to push the ball downfield. His 24 pass attempts of 20 yards or more, according to PFF, are tied for the 4th most in football. However, his completion rate ranks 31st on those passes. He's connected on just 6 of those 24 downfield pass attempts. And if it wasn't for a couple pass interference penalties, I think the perception around Love's and this offense's downfield ability would be even worse than what it is. And we saw the Packers with this issue early on last season in 2022. Before Christian Watson had his breakout game against Dallas in Week 10, this was an offense that's really, really struggled to push the ball downfield. And we're seeing kind of the similar side effects of that, or repercussions of that, I should say, from how defenses are playing Green Bay. Right now, they're not scared of getting beat over the top by this offense. So that leads to them shrinking the field, playing closer to the line of scrimmage. There's less space for, the offense to operate within, whether that's the run game, whether that's over the middle, whether that's underneath routes. And it just becomes more challenging to move the ball when the Packers are being defended how they are. And it's really going to take, to a degree, just them becoming more efficient on those deep balls. They're going to need to hit on them more. When that happens, you see the reverse of everything just described. Defense respects it more. They feel a need to defend against it, so they start backing up a little bit from the line of scrimmage. That creates better spacing, hopefully more opportunities in the run game, but certainly more opportunities in the passing game for those underneath routes. So, they have a lot of speed. Jaden Reed, Luke Musgrave, Christian Watson, but they're going to need all those 3, a combination of to start being able to come down with those passes. And of course, it falls on Love's shoulders too, putting the ball in the correct place. But the Packers' inability to hit the deep ball is not only limiting their explosive play potential, but it's having a ripple down effect to and impacting other facets of the offense. Second item that's contributed to the Packers' issues, an ineffective run game. I mean, right now the Packers rank 26 in yards per carry at 3.5 per game, and that number is even that number is inflated. I mean, Jordan Love's had a number of big scrambles this season that's helped lift that number a little bit, and of course, getting Aaron Jones back is going to help. But I mean, there's been so many running plays where AJ Dillon is hitting the backfield before he even gets the chance to get going, where running lanes just aren't there. Like, Aaron Jones is as good as he is, as great of a playmaker as he is, as good as he is at taking nothing and trying to find something out of it. Like, even his return, the way the offensive line has been blocking, is only going to do so much. Like, running lanes aren't there. AJ Dillon, he has to improve, and we saw a more physical, a more decisive version of him against the Raiders, which was fantastic to see. But again, it's not as if all these running game woes are on his shoulders either. The offensive line has to do a better job of creating consistent running lanes for these backs. So, yes, getting Aaron Jones back certainly helps, but I don't think his return is going to be this magic fix for the run game either. And again, the trickle down effect of not being able to move the ball on the ground, oftentimes you run on early downs. So now you're behind the sticks. It's now 2nd and 8, or you're dealing with 3rd and 7s. You're in predictable passing situations. And now the advantage is all with the defense. They're the ones doing the dictating in those scenarios because you can't get going in the ground game. The pass rush, and 2nd and long, 3rd and longs, predictable passing situations, they don't have to worry about you running the ball. They got one sole focus: go from point A to point B to get after the quarterback. The defense as a whole, they're able to get into favorable matchups. They know you're passing the ball. They know from film what concepts you want to lean on. They have the advantage in those situations. And so on the flip side, if you can get the ground game going, if you can put yourself in 2nd and 4s, 3rd and 1s, the entire playbook is open at that point. You can, it opens up opportunities in the passing game, specifically off play action. If a defense has to defend both the run and the pass, if it's 2nd and 2, you could run the ball, you could pass the ball. That pass rush loses its bite because they can't fully commit to just going to get after the quarterback. They have to be mindful of the run game. Same thing for the secondary and just the defense as a whole. The offense has the advantage back in their court. They can do the dictating in those situations, but the Packers just have not put themselves consistently in those situations, which leads to 3 and outs, quick drives, puts more stress on the defense, and overall just a lack of complementary football. I mean, just with these first two items that we've talked about here, you can just see the ripple down effect of what their inability in these areas has to the rest of the offense, what that does to then the defense by putting, a defense that's been up and down this season. It's more burden on their shoulders, when they have to be out there for more plays. So just the lack of complementary football. And again, these issues, it's not just not being able to stop the run, but then how does that impact the passing game, the deep passing game, the defense? There's so much additional, things that go into what's contributing to the Packers' woes. All right, next up, number 3, the inexperience at the wide receiver or tight end position, the pass catchers, is absolutely showing. Jordan Love's low completion percentage, yes, it's on his shoulders. He has to be more accurate, 100%. But there have been plenty of times where the youth at tight end, the youth at receivers have contributed to his low completion percentage. Overall, there's been a lack of attention to detail in the routes being ran, which alters where Love expects the pass catchers to be. It alters when he expects them to be there. And these young pass catchers, they've also struggled when opponents have been physical with them, which a lot of opponents have, again, because they're not afraid of the deep ball. They're playing closer to the line of scrimmage. There's more, or the cornerbacks are challenging the receivers more at the line of scrimmage. It's more physical coverage that they have to fight through. That's disrupting their route. That's disrupting the timing of their route again. And when, half a second, a split second in football from a quarterback's perspective in terms of is the window there, is it not? I need to go through my next progression. The offensive line, the pressure around them, like that makes a world of difference in the NFL. And it's those little precision details that aren't being executed on correctly. Again, affecting where the receiver is within the route versus where Love expects them to be, the timing of it all, and then contested catches. I mean, this group has really struggled to make contested catches this season as well. So you add all those factors together, and that is playing a big role in the inconsistency that we're seeing from this group. One other thing I'll mention, Jordan Love, this was a week ago now, when talking with us, said that unscouted looks have given the Packers the pass catchers some fits as well. And to a degree, there's only so much you can do with that. If they're getting a new look, they have to experience it first. But that aspect of it as well is throwing some things off for the passing game too. And to a degree, this is kind of what the Packers signed up for. When you go into a season with this much youth at receiver, that much youth at tight end, like this is just a part of the learning curve. But again, going back to the original point when we started this conversation, we got to see progression. We got to see them improving in these areas. Next up, schematically, the Packers are limited right now. I'll touch more on Matt LaFleur's game plans, play calling here in a second. So this isn't to absolve him of any of the responsibilities. At the end of the day, he's the head coach. At the end of the day, he's the play caller. It's his job to put these guys in the best positions to be successful. With that said, when you can't run the ball effectively, when you don't have a deep ball that concern defenses, like there's really nothing about this Packers offense right now that defenses fear. Nothing whatsoever. Again, you can't run the ball. You can't beat them over the top. And going back to what I talked about earlier, when you don't have those elements, defenses shrink the field. There's less spacing to operate within. Going over the middle of the field is a big component of the Matt LaFleur offense. Go watch the 49ers and how, Brock Purdy and before him, Jimmy Garoppolo just attacked that part of the field. We saw Jordan Love doing that over the summer. We didn't see it all that much against the Raiders. In part, there's just a ton of people there. Defenses are muddying things up where the Packers want to go with the football again because they're not scared of the run and they're not scared of getting beat deep. So schematically, in terms of what LaFleur's able to draw up in terms of spacing is limited. Also, going back to the previous point, the execution of the detail, doing the little things right, like that is not happening consistently whatsoever. So, he talked about it after the Raiders game, like even in some situations in that game where they had what he called premier looks, like what the Packers had dialed up versus what the Raiders were showing defensively was a premier look, a premier opportunity for the Packers to pick up a chunk play to exploit what was taking place on the field, but they were unable to do so. And again, that goes back to the execution from all 11 players on the football field. So you combine all that together, the execution, the details, the lack of run game, the ineffective deep game, and again, schematically, there's only so much that the coach, the play caller can do in those situations. So how do you fix that? Better with the details, better execution. Find a way to either move the ball on the ground or hit one of the deep passes. Like one of those elements has to start working for the Green Bay Packers, or they're just going to be, they're going to be limited. There's only so much you can do when you're struggling in those two key phases of NFL offense. And again, going back to the play calling aspect of it, Matt LaFleur, he's limited in what he can ask of his guys right now. All right, sticking with Matt LaFleur and the play calling, the Packers need to use this bye week here as an opportunity to hit the reset button to a degree, to go back to the basics. Whether it's football, coaching, playing, any sport, when things are going poorly, oftentimes going back to the basics, the fundamentals of what you want to accomplish is a great way to get you back on track. And I think this bye week is an opportunity for Matt LaFleur and this offense to do that. What is it? What is at the core that this Matt LaFleur offense wants to accomplish? And we heard him talk about early on in his tenure the illusion of complexity. Those are Matt LaFleur's words. And in short, that helps keep things relatively simple for the offense, which this offense needs right now. Again, they can't execute on the details. Like in the run game specifically, they are struggling with inside zone, outside zone concepts and, creating running lanes in what are core key elements of the Matt LaFleur offense. So in the Raiders game, asking them to running an end around with Christian Watson, where now the offensive line and the receivers and tight ends, for that play to work, you need 6 or 7 blocks to be placed perfectly, timed perfectly, all while on the move. Like, there's been nothing about this Packers run game to say that they can execute on that. Again, when they can't consistently create running lanes in the basic inside zone, outside zone concepts that this Matt LaFleur offense is built around. So I get the idea of it. On paper, it makes sense. Your offense is struggling to move the ball. You're trying to help them by putting them, leaving the defense guessing to a degree. You feel that what you've established up to that point is a great way to catch them off guard. But from a complexity standpoint, in terms of needing all those things to go correctly for an offense that, as we talked about detail-wise, isn't doing that with the simple core concepts, like that's just not gelling. And we saw the result of that play. There were 4 Raiders in the backfield before you know what, Christian Watson never had a chance to get anything going on that play. They need to take a step back, to my larger point here, and go back to the core fundamentals of what the Matt LaFleur offense wants to accomplish. And again, I'll pivot back towards where I was going with this originally. that illusion of complexity. In short, it's meant to keep things relatively simple for the offense while still keeping the defense off balance, still keeping the defense guessing. So how do you do that? You utilize motion. Packers got to get back to motion, and not just motion for the sake of, moving a guy from one side to the other, but, having that motion force the defense into tipping its hand, having them make last second adjustments that now you as the offense has the advantage. It requires the illusion of complexity, requires running a variety of plays from just a few personnel packages. Like this Packers offense, they're young, but they have speed, they have versatility. Use that to your advantage because those guys can take on a variety of roles, do a variety of tasks. Like you can stay in, 1, 2 personnel groupings for a majority of the game, but still run a variety of plays from that. And what that does from the defense's perspective is, if you're not subbing out, they're not going to have the opportunity to. Also, it creates mismatches. When you have guys who can handle a variety of roles, you can put them in advantageous situations against the specific defender that they're going up against. The other thing is like plays, building concepts off each other throughout the course of the game. Looking back at that Raiders game, that was one of the big question marks. Like from specifically a passing game perspective, like it was tough to figure out what are the Packers trying to accomplish and what are they setting up here in the first half that they're going to exploit in the second half. Like that element was very much missing. And the like play component of it is plays that, start out, formation wise, motion wise, even the initial, first few yards of the routes might look pretty similar, but they actually end up quite different. And so, that's how you can keep defenses off balance, guessing by mixing those in throughout the game. Those are core elements of what Matt LaFleur's talked about when he first got here, the illusion of complexity. And again, it's complex for the defense because of all the eye candy you're throwing at them. But from the offense's perspective, the concepts are relatively, of course, everything's all relative, but relatively simpler to execute on, which this group very much needs. All right, next up, injuries. Main injuries on offense for the Packers just hasn't been kind to them. Aaron Jones exited week 1 against the Bears. He was on a snap count against the Lions. He's missed the other games this season. Christian Watson didn't make his debut until week 4. David Bakhtiari's out for the season. Elton Jenkins missed 2.5 games. John Runyan, Zach Tom have been banged up as well. And there hasn't been a game this season where Love hasn't had both his preferred 5 on the offensive line and all of his skill position players. When both Jones and Watson were back against the Lions, Elton Jenkins was still out. Elton Jenkins returns against the Raiders. Now the Packers are without Aaron Jones again. They still have not had his full complement of, again, the preferred 5. And I get David Bakhtiari. Obviously, he's on IR. His season's over. They're not going to have their original starting 5, but their preferred 5 is, because Bakhtiari isn't available, who do you want on the field? So they haven't had that preferred 5 plus their full complement of skill position players yet. And of course, that's going to have an impact on the offense. All right, 2 more for you. A lack of timely adjustments. The Packers have been one of the best scoring offenses in the third quarter this season, showing that whatever adjustments they make during halftime, they're working. They've been really, really effective in that third quarter. However, it cannot take that long for those adjustments to happen. The Saints game at that point, they're down 3 scores. The Lions game at that point, they're down 3 scores. The Raiders should have been up multiple scores on the Packers going into the third quarter. It's way too late to wait until that time frame, that time period, halftime, the third quarter, for those adjustments to take place. And all 3 of those, or in 2 of those instances, the Packers, again, were down multiple scores, should have been on 3 occasions. They're fortunate that they were able to come back against the Saints, but otherwise, that's 3 losses. It would be 4 losses in a row, counting the Atlanta game. And I feel the lack of timely adjustments we saw again against the Raiders and in the start of the game. So Aaron Jones, Matt LaFleur said, had his hamstring, it popped up again during Saturday's practice. And who knows when the Packers officially ruled them out. It wasn't announced till Monday. Maybe they made that decision Saturday, Sunday, Monday morning, whenever it was. But regardless, at that point, at that stage, it's too late to scrap the game plan. Matt LaFleur cannot start over at that point. They've spent the whole week implementing what they want to do. So to a degree, the game plan is the game plan at that point. You don't have Aaron Jones. You got to adjust. And I don't feel that we saw enough of those adjustments. And the perfect example of this is at halftime of the Raiders game, Patrick Taylor had more targets than Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs combined. My guess is that those were targets, plays meant for Aaron Jones. And like I said, sprinkling those in here and there, Patrick Taylor having to play a bigger role, like that's just a part of dealing with the injury that happened at the last minute, the fact that they didn't have Jones at the last minute. But you can't have Patrick Taylor, who's now been cut, hasn't even been re-signed to the practice squad, getting more targets than your two-star wide receivers. Matt LaFleur said after the Lions game, we got to do a better job of getting the ball in our playmakers' hands, even if we're manufacturing touches for them. He talked about it. They didn't do it. To me, that's an adjustment aspect. That's not making the timely adjustments that you have to given the circumstances and what's taken place around you. So of course that falls on coaching, but I'm gonna pivot back to I think that's the youth and the inexperience as well. Going back to that comment I mentioned earlier that Jordan Love made, that unscouted looks have given these young pass catchers, this offense, some fits at times. I think that's a product of it as well in terms of their, when you're dealing with youth and experience, you don't have the ability to adjust as quickly or, as maybe as much, swing the pendulum in the other direction as much as you'd want to, because they don't have the banked reps to be able to go out there and then, maybe necessarily execute at the level that you want, those changes and the effect that those changes have. So again, it's coaching. It goes back to the youth and inexperience. There isn't just one thing that we can point to, but this is absolutely something that has to improve. They cannot keep waiting until the third quarter of games to finally find some momentum. All right, last one for you. The pass blocking the last two games. For the first three games, the Packers' pass blocking was excellent. However, it's taken about a 180-degree turn these last 2 weeks. According to PFF, Jordan Love was pressured on nearly 50% of his dropbacks against the Lions, which is just an absurd amount. And from a game plan perspective, like if the quarterback's under that much duress and oftentimes as quickly as Love was, like it doesn't matter what you call it, doesn't matter who the play is intended for. Like those plays are not going to work. Against the Raiders, Malcolm Kuntz, Max Crosby, their two edge rushers, they had 11 pressures. Jordan Love had 34 dropbacks. So those two players got after Love about a third of his dropbacks. And again, there's a multitude of reasons. We've gone over a bunch of them why the offense is struggling. So, the pass blocking isn't necessarily the sole reason that the offense has really struggled as of late, but it's not a coincidence either that in the first three games, Jordan Love had 6 touchdowns to just 1 interception. And over the last 2 games, he's now had 5 interceptions. Early on in the season, and we saw this, throughout training camp in the preseason, Love had time to go through his progressions. He didn't have to be picky by any means. And I think we saw that in the numbers I just mentioned, the touchdown to interception ratio. But one of the aspects about Love throughout the summer that really impressed me was his ability to know, all right, when should I fit this into a tight window? When do I push it downfield? When do I just go through my progression and take what the defense is giving me? That to me, that's a very mature quality to see in a quarterback who has such little experience. And we saw that early on in the season, but that's a product of having time, knowing that you have time in the pocket to go through your next progression. And that helps the receivers too. That additional, half second of time in the pocket, that's additional time for them to get open, which they very much need. Again, the physicality they've been going up against, the routes maybe not being as precise as they should, that gives them some additional time. So of course, everybody was benefiting from that, and we were seeing the results. The last 2 weeks, however, Love has had to adjust his clock. He's had to very, very quickly go, from that Saints game to that Lions game, going from, I have all the time in the world right now. I can go through, all 4 or 5 of my progressions and be a little bit picky about, who I want to get the ball to. And all of a sudden in that Lions game, that was gone. That time was gone. The ball had to be out immediately. You see even the slightest window open, you had to take it. And to a lesser extent, we saw that a bit in the Raiders game as well. Again, the Raiders game from the offensive line perspective wasn't nearly as brutal as the Lions game by any means, but we still saw that the Raiders were able to generate pressure, and Love's had to adjust his internal clock. How much time does he have in the pocket? And of course, that just has a ripple down effect to then his decision making. And I feel like we've seen that too. We've seen a young quarterback who's being a little bit more rushed, who knows he doesn't have the time that he does and is maybe trying to force the ball into windows that in week 1 or week 2 we wouldn't have seen him taking. So again, they've had some tough matchups. Aiden Hutchinson, Max Crosby, but it's the NFL. You're going to run into tough matchups pretty much every week. The pass blocking has to improve for this Packers team, and then I think we're going to see Love's play and everyone else's improve with that as well. So there you have it, my friends. Whew, that was a lot. My 8 big factors right now that have contributed to just the overall struggles that the Packers offense is facing. I appreciate you guys tuning in. As always, hit like on the video, hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. I greatly appreciate it. You can follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel, and you can find all my work over at Packers Wire. So until next time, friends, take care, stay safe, and as always,